the Russian army and its land capabilities, army, marines, airborne forces, they are 90% of them are tied up in the fighting in Ukraine, and they are suffering huge losses all the time. The air force is in better condition, the navy is somewhat better condition, but still Russia don't have enough military force now to threaten West seriously with military force. And I don't think that they will have that in 5 years' time either.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. And this time we are joined by Major General Pekka Toveri, who served in the Finnish army for more than 35 years. During his military career, he commanded Finland's armoured brigade, was military attaché to Washington and director of the intelligence division of the Defence Command. He now serves as a member of the European Parliament. Welcome to Frontline. It's lovely to speak to you, Pekka. This week, NATO announced a new maritime security operation. It's called Baltic Sentry, and it's to protect the underwater critical infrastructure in the Baltic. It comes after Finland seized a Russian-linked tanker suspected of sabotaging power cable between Finland and Estonia. What do you think of this decisive action by NATO now?
Well, I think it's an important signal that NATO is worried about the situation and is willing to support its member states by sending some capabilities to the Baltic Sea area. However, the major responsibility to act on this kind of sabotage acts remains on the nations themselves.
And just overall, could you paint a picture for us of how you see the threat that Russia poses to Finland? How great is it in general?
Well, it's a little bit like our former President Niinistö said, that these hybrid activities are more of a nuisance. They are not serious enough to threaten the Finnish independence, freedom, and democracy. But unless, if we are careless and let it continue and grow, it might become first a nuisance, but even more serious results may be happening. So we need to be alert and take active actions against this kind of activities.
Which Finland has done. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. You talk about it being a nuisance, but is there a specific sustained campaign against Finland's underwater infrastructure? How do you see it?
Well, we've seen what happened in October 23 when this Chinese tanker cut the gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia, and now we have a new incident again. Similar tactics used against energy infrastructure and communications on the bottom of Gulf of Finland. These are obviously very serious actions and show that Russia has, we know that Russia has done intelligence to locate the underwater infrastructure as a preparation for this kind of sabotage actions, and now we see the sabotage actually happening. So yes, it's a threat to us, and we have to react to it.
And just how resilient is Finland to those threats?
Well, we are, as I said, the undersea infrastructure is very important. We have, through the years, we've been working on to safeguard that we are not relying only on one line. For example, you talk about the communication lines to Europe. There are a number of those. So cutting one communication, even two, don't affect us too much. Same goes with the electric cables that were cut. There are two of those, and now we lost one. So we have built this resilience to the infrastructure through the years. So, but again, if like in this case, the ship went along the Gulf of Finland for 100 kilometers, over 60 miles, tracking the anchor. It cut one electric line, 4 communications cables. It was a half an hour from the second electric cable before the Finnish Coast Guard intervened. So even though we have built the resilience, there are still risks.
And yet Finland is being praised for being extremely decisive in its intervention with the Eagle-S, the Russian-linked ship. It's been praised for not involving the military when it seized the ship and actually using its coast guards and the police. How would that decision have been taken?
Well, we have a very long history in Finland on the interagency cooperation. For example, the police, border guard, and military exercise dozens of times annually, different kind of scenarios, and changing of information, etc. The maritime situational picture, which is a basis for all actions at sea, is actually created by in good cooperation with all these authorities. So every single sensor, whether it's a camera, whether it's a radar, whether it's a civil administration, Coast Guard, or Finnish Navy, they feed the same situational picture, which is created combined. And so we have a long tradition, and this operation, the boarding operation, for example, they were using Coast Guard and Army helicopters to transport the Coast Guard special forces and the police SWAT team to the ship. So it just shows that, and it happened very fast in Christmas time. So it just shows that the years of exercises and practicing just bears fruit sometimes.
So a correction on my part then, the military was involved, but not directly involved in actually boarding the ship, but involved in supplying the people who did. Finland's Bureau of Investigation is looking into this. It's preparing charges of aggravated interference with telecommunications and aggravated vandalism. Do you think this could actually set an example and set a precedent for the way that nations who are affected by this kind of potential sabotage react?
Well, I hope so. We all understand that our greatest strength is that we are democratic countries which have a functional legal system where people can expect to have legal counsel and fair trials. And it's also a weakness in this case because Russia knows very well how this works. It is very difficult to get any proof that would hold on a court that this is a Russian government activity. But we still have to prosecute these, at least to get these proxies who are used in this kind of operation, in this case, this ship flagged to the Cook Islands and its owners to be responsible for the damage they have done.
The NATO initiative that I mentioned earlier to protect the Baltic, it comes within weeks of another Nordic Warden, which involved the Joint Expeditionary Force. Do you think that these two different operations will complement each other?
Well, I think so. I think that we have not only inside Finland, but we also between different Baltic states, we have a long history of cooperation in maritime operations. And now that we are all in NATO, in NATO too. So I think that our militaries and our authorities coordinate these very carefully.
Just on another subject, Finland has closed its 830-mile border with Russia, and it did so in late 2023 because of the growing number of asylum seekers trying to cross the border into Finland. It accuses Russia of weaponizing migration. Why would it do it, and what kind of effect has it had on Finland?
Well, it's old Russian tactics. We saw that happen in 2015 against Norway and Finland. So in that retrospect, it's nothing new, except that they used a bit different border crossing points than previously. And what they are trying to do is multiple things. They try to burden the Finnish authorities. We have to put resources to guarding the border and prevent these kind of activities. They can use it in the info operations, trying to blame Finland breaking international agreements and not taking asylum seekers, etc. And they're also trying to create diversion within Finland between Finns about these issues, because we have a lot of people who think that okay, we shouldn't do this because we should take all asylum seekers inside, even though these people are really not refugees. And people who think that no, we should close the border. And this dividing West, both the nations within the Western Europe and then the Western European organizations, is all old tactics. And when for example, when the aggression to attack the Ukraine started 22, Russia tried to divide Finns between those who support Ukraine and those who support Russia. Well, it didn't go too well. because 99.9% of Finns are supporting Ukraine in this case. So there's no division. So, but when you look, for example, Gaza, when the Gaza started, Russians started information operations to get those who are supporting Israel and those who are supporting Palestine to fight each other on social media and otherwise. And there, the groups were much more balanced. And this is the same kind of tactics. Let's divide Finns from inside.
And you were Finland's military attaché to Washington when Donald Trump was president the first time round. His imminent inauguration is already he's taking the credit for the Gaza-Israeli hostage peace deal. Is he going to be the president to end wars, do you think, as he would no doubt like to be known?
Well, I think that he will at least try, and which is, on the other hand, I think it's a good thing. There's been a lot of worries about here what happens. Will the United States start to discuss about peace in Ukraine over the Ukrainian heads and so on? But when you look at the people he has nominated for key positions, like a chief negotiator, the National Security Council advisor, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, they all had quite hard attitudes towards Russia, saying that we shouldn't give everything to Putin, and if they are not being reasonable, we should use sanctions and military support to Ukraine to force Russians to be more reasonable, which is, I think, it's a good sign. So we'll see what happens. But for sure, I think that the Trump administration will try to end the war in Europe, and they will take action on that.
And yet, when you look at the kind of things that the president-elect has been saying, he has suggested he would consider military action to take Greenland. Whatever your interpretation of the reality of his real intentions is there, it does, however, highlight a serious security concerns in the Arctic, doesn't it?
Yes. Many people got very worried about these talks, and I'm not too worried about it. President of Mr. Trump's negotiation tactics are a bit like Russian negotiation tactics. You demand impossible, then you double your demand, and in the end, if you get half what you demanded in the beginning, you're still a winner. And this is just a start on that. We have to remember that in the United States, president don't decide on peace and war. Congress does, and I highly doubt that Congress would give Trump permission to attack an ally with military force. It's not going to happen. It's just tactics and talks. I think there are two things. What is negative in this case, of course, that it creates some worry and friction within the NATO alliance, and it gives tools to Mr. Putin and President Xi, claiming that, well, it's okay for us to claim our neighboring countries' areas since the United States is demanding the same. The positive thing is that the United States is interested about Arctic and Arctic security, because 2016, when I was in Washington, D.C., and Trump was first-time president, nobody except the two senators from Alaska and the U.S. Coast Guard were interested about Arctic. And now it has changed totally, which is very good, because Arctic security is very important for all the Nordic countries too. And China and Russia are trying to both enroach and have a stronger position there.
I'm just interested to get your perspective when you were talking about making a demand, doubling it, and maybe getting half of it in terms of Trump's kind of tactics. And specifically, he wants NATO members, or has said so, to spend 5% of GDP on defence, and for Europe to do more for its own security generally. Does Finland welcome that kind of demand?
Definitely. Europe has been far too lax in these issues, and this has been going on for decades. It's not Trump in 2016 who came up with the demand that Europe should do more for its defense. Several previous American presidents have demanded the same, but nobody listened. The good thing with Trump's actions in the first term was that he got the Europeans to do something, and now it seems that we will have the same effect, and we need to do more. The border countries, currently the Nordic countries, Baltic states, and Poland are almost the only ones who are really taking real efforts to improve our defense, and we are starting to get a bit fed up with the bigger European countries who don't do their share. And if Trump as a president can force them to take action, that's a positive thing.
And what is your message to those countries which you believe are not pulling their weight in terms of European security?
Well, they should understand that, let's talk about, for example, Spain. It's easy to look at the map and say, well, what's happening in Ukraine, it's not our problem. It's, you have to drive a T-72 tanks a couple thousand kilometers before it's in the central plaza of Madrid. But these people in the West have to understand that Russia has been operating against them already for years. The sabotage actions, assassinations, info campaigns, cyber warfare, etc., etc. The southern European countries should understand that Russian activities in northern Africa are part of the reason that they have refugee problem and etc. So Russia is threat already, and if Russia attacks Eastern European countries, bordering countries, and breaks NATO, everybody will suffer. Therefore, everybody have to pull their weight.
Interesting to get your perspective on a recent article that has been published in a magazine on foreign affairs and geopolitics. And it writes about the Putinisation of Central Europe, as an increasing number of leaders sympathetic towards Vladimir Putin are either in power or might gain more power in 2025. It cites Austria, Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Are you concerned he's gaining more influence in European politics?
Certainly, that's as said. That's one of the tactics. The biggest threat against for Putin and biggest hindrance for his aims in Europe is the unity of Europe, both NATO and the EU. And he tries to break the both organizations, and it's always easier to do it from inside. And now that having certain governments who are cooperating with Putin and breaking the unified views and ideas of these organizations, they are threats. How big a threat remains to be seen. You have to remember that it started basically with Hungary, with Orban starting to do Putin's work, but it will be interesting to see in the next elections in Hungary because, for example, in the EU elections, Orban and his party did very poorly, and the opposition is actually much stronger. So it's not a done deal yet, but it's a threat.
And in Ukraine itself, if there is a peace deal or a ceasefire which ends the fighting, what might the consequences, do you think, be for Russia's activities to cause more trouble in the so-called grey zone, that area below the threshold of war, either in Ukraine or elsewhere?
Well, whatever happens in Ukraine, and the war hasn't gone too well for Russia. It's been going almost 3 years now, and Ukraine is still not conquered, and they don't have the capability to conquer the Ukraine. But that doesn't mean that Putin's ambitions have gone away. No, they haven't. And if the peace deal, which we might see this year, is something that gives Putin something. He can keep the 20% he's occupying now of Ukraine's area. He's not, Russia is not punished for its criminal activities. They don't have to pay any compensation for the damage they've done. There's no war criminals going to court. It will just empower him. It's easy for him to say that, well, I was right. Only thing I need to do is to wage a war a couple of years, sacrifice a couple 100,000 soldiers, and the weak West gives me what I want. So I got something, let's rebuild the army and repeat this. You shouldn't feed the dictators. We saw it in 1930s. It doesn't work. The appetite just grows the more you feed them.
Just interested in the light of you talking about dictators having this thirst to continue, how much of a threat do you think Putin actually poses militarily beyond Ukraine's borders?
Well, I'm not too worried about that. The Russian army and its land capabilities, army, Marines, airborne forces, they are 90% of them are tied up in the fighting in Ukraine, and they are suffering huge losses all the time. The Air Force is in better condition, the Navy is somewhat better condition, but still Russia don't have enough military force now to threaten West seriously with military force. And I don't think that they will have that in 5 years' time either.
So in terms of the way that the war should actually end, in order to, you were talking earlier about how Russia has to not there has to be no caving into Russia, in your view. What kind of terms need to be there to make sure that any ambitions that Putin might have are thwarted?
Well, I think that Russia should face a military defeat. They should be forced to withdraw from the occupied areas, including Crimea. That would probably be end of Putin's time in power, and his successor would probably understand that fighting Ukraine supported by the West is a bad idea. Let's find somebody smaller to attack, and let West be. Russians understand only force and power. That's the negotiating with them from the position of weakness is never a good idea.
Pekka Toveri, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.